really, really interesting guest coming up on the show, who does nature-based coaching. And you might be wondering, if you're anything like me, you love being in nature. I love my walks, morning, any excuse for me to get out for a walk, the fresh air, and any time of year, really. I must admit, I enjoy going for walks. Even in the winter time, you feel the crisp, fresh air, and I think this is really fascinating for me, and I'm sure our listeners will think it's fascinating as well. So we've got Ellie Lloyd-Jones, who's a nature-based coach. She takes groups out for walks in the beautiful countryside. Ellie, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Jim.
It's really great to speak to you, Ellie. And what I find fascinating is, just for our listeners, can you tell us what sort of a nature-based coach involves?
Yeah, so it's getting outside to have the conversations that you would normally have indoors. So if that's with a team or a group, the way that I normally do it, the first thing allows you to breathe in some fresh air. It allows you to move your body and to just raise your gaze from screens, because we spend most of our time looking at probably our mobile devices, and when we're bored of that, we will then look at our laptops or computer screens, and then when we're bored of that, we'll look at our TV screens, but we're not using the whole of our peripheral vision. And there's a lot of scientific research to show that it really helps the brain relax when we can look at a wide vista. So that's the sort of thing that I like to encourage people to do. And then we'll go for a walk as a group or a team. Sometimes we'll just have a question that we're mulling over. I'll create coaching cards with prompts on that encourage people to connect with each other. They connect with themselves a little bit as they're starting to reflect, and they also connect with nature, because the coaching prompts will often be about something that's in the landscape they're walking in, so maybe an oak tree or a squirrel or something, and it will talk about the character traits of that animal and start to allow you to mirror some of those character traits.
Yeah, I find that really, really fascinating. I really do, and I think that it's really fantastic, to be around sort of good company and getting out there, and the beauty of nature as well. I mean, what are some of the highlights for you? I think it's quite a unique way of sort of doing things, and I think for me, I can only speak anecdotally. I prefer to be in the outdoors than sitting in a boardroom, but obviously sort of sometimes I know it's not logistically possible. But what are some of the highlights for you, sort of getting out there and bouncing ideas and having coaching questions, sort of reflecting on your experiences? What are some of the highlights that sort of spring to mind?
There are so many. One of my favourites is how we connect with people on a different level. Most people, like you say, most people don't know this concept. It's fairly new, although actually if you think about it, getting out and into nature, we used to live that way. We built these boxes that we spend all of our time in. So it's very innate to us to be outdoors. But being able to see the difference in people when they come along to one of my events, or one of my sessions, and there's a little bit of anxiety. They don't really know what to expect, what's going to happen, and the difference in them at the end. I did an evening event back in May, I think it was, and there were about a handful of us, and we were all a little bit stressed, and to be honest, myself included, I could have done with staying at home. I was tired, and we all kind of felt that same way. And at the end, when I did the checkout, somebody said it feels like the trees have absorbed my stress, because I feel so much better. And everybody said that they slept better that evening as well. And we were just walking in the forest. Some of these questions that are on the coaching cards as well almost give you permission to go a little bit deeper in the conversation, because we don't naturally connect in the same way that we used to with the advance of social media. People feel that they connected to thousands of people, but in reality, the depth of the conversations and the real connection tends to happen face to face. And so the cards allow people to do that. And so people have an experience that stays with them rather than just a conversation. So they're the highlights that I get from it.
Yeah, and that's a really great point. And I sort of reflecting on, I think experiences do change people absolutely, or our perception on sort of on things. So I think that really it's for me, speaking to you earlier, I sort of sense an experience. It's more of an experience rather than sort of like just sort of sitting down. And I'm not suggesting that sort of sitting in a boardroom or an office isn't effective. I'm sure it is from a coaching perspective, but I think creating the experience for somebody is always a great way to sort of tap into the parts of the brain that we may not tap into, like sitting down in a boardroom type thing. Now that obviously has its place, but I suppose sort of building it up, any sort of challenges, sort of, I'm guessing obviously it might not be for everybody. Some people, like you said, their perception of what it might be not what it is until they get out there, and they'll, they may think, okay, well, one of them sort of getting out there type thing, it maybe the perception of what it involves. But what are some of the challenges that you've had building it up, Ellie, looking back on things now?
Oh, it's all been challenges, Jim. It's constantly, it constantly challenges different months. The one that most people ask me about is the weather. Living in the UK, this summer aside, generally people ask what happens when it rains. But in reality, this is the third year I've been running these events, and I've only had to cancel one event, and that's when there was a storm and there was a weather warning. So that wouldn't have been ideal to go out. We have actually had to cancel one because of the heat this summer, which I didn't expect. So that's challenging, getting people to understand that we're not going to melt in a bit of snow or a little bit of rain. We just prepare for it. Another is, as you said, people don't necessarily know what to expect. It's a fairly new but growing body of work. So it's getting people to understand what this is. A lot of people say, well, we already do walk and talk, but it's very different from a walk and talk. There's research to show that spending time in nature and getting outside is great, but only does so much for your mental health. The actual intentional act of going outside and connecting with nature to really be present and intentional, that's where the real magic happens to improve your mental health.
Absolutely, 100%. I think sort of getting out there for sure, and like you said, it's not just about sort of walking and talking. You've got sort of a structure to it in terms of like the questions, but also I think it's important to have that flexibility which you have around structure. There's no rigidity. I mean, sort of going back on the weather, really, to be honest, I think the weather in the UK is good, Ellie. I really do. I think that the summers are amazing, that it's light forever type thing, and and the winters are, generally speaking, relatively mild. And it's interesting, really, because I've had this conversation around, because I like a bit of cricket as well, and it's interesting, really, that there's so many other grounds around the world that people don't expect that more cricketing days are rained off than in the UK. And I just think sometimes it's almost like a stigma around the UK around the weather, where, ironically, you could go to Europe now, it's like 40-something degrees. You probably couldn't walk 10 minutes without melting. Or in the depths of winter in some countries, it's like, minus, a million degrees. So I think that's a really great point you've made in terms of only one day being sort of, and if it sprinkles, if it rains, it is what it is, really. I don't mind going out in the rain. I always do. I suppose it's because I'm involved in sport and that sort of stuff, really. I'm sure some people might not do, to be fair, but I like your authenticity about how there has been sort of challenges, and no doubt there will be more. Do you find, having a sort of coaching background, that if things do come along your way, you're able to apply the techniques to sort of formulate a way forward?
Yes, which is interesting, and it's always, I kind of treat it as a learning opportunity. All of it is just an experience to learn from, which is actually one of the positives of the events. No two events that I run are the same, because we're working in nature, so there's always going to be something. We can't control it. I can't control if there's a rain shower partway through. I'm doing a series of walks along the River Thames with Professor Jonathan Passmore this year and next. And on our very first one, where we'd got 14 people came along, everyone was really excited. And it was the 31st of January, and partway through we had to call a halt to it because the river and a neighbouring lake had burst its banks and we couldn't continue on the path. And my initial response was one of disappointment, and how I'd let people down that were coming on this inaugural walk. But as it happens, everybody remembers the bits that don't go quite as we planned. It adds to the experience, and it was a reminder that we can't control everything. We can do our best. And we've got great memories of us all hitching a ride in a minibus afterwards. So that's probably one of the most memorable walks, even though it's the one that was most, I will say, disastrous, because it really didn't go to plan.
Yeah, and it's almost like metaphorical in the sense that we can only control we can control, and basically nature is boss at the end of the day. There's some things we sort of can control, but many things that we can't control too. And in terms of sort of the vision, I mean, you've really taken this on, Ellie, and sort of, really, really, it's amazing what you've achieved so far. I'm sure there's a lot more you will achieve, but are you okay to share the vision, going forward? Do you have a sort of vision in terms of like where you hope for this to go?
Yeah, it's more of a feeling or an emotion, I suppose. But I get lots of people on social media saying that they wish they could come to one of my events, but I'm based in Cheshire and that's not close by for everybody. And so my vision is to have an ambassador who runs these events in every county. That's what I would love to happen. I've got an ambassador that works for me in North Wales, somebody who works in Cambridge. I've actually got somebody coming on board who's going to partner with me in Australia, and somebody who's interested in America. So it's around just spreading the word, I suppose, or just spreading the vision that I think, in my own uneducated experience, that a lot of the common issues we have with our health and with our just tiredness and the way that we live in the Western world is because we've engineered all of the things that are naturally good for us out of our lives. We've made it difficult to step outside because our house is a central heating and we've got access to everything at the click of a button and we can keep ourselves relatively comfortable. But that's actually slowly making a lot of us ill by being sedentary all day. So I'd like to provide an opportunity for people to step out and make it really easy for them to do that, to do the things like connect with people face to face, to try and combat the epidemic of loneliness, to help people move their bodies so that they're not sitting down for 90% of the day, and to allow them to just reconnect with nature, because there's what's called fractals in nature that are naturally softening and calming, like the shapes of leaves and trees and patterns. All of that is naturally calming for us, and part of me makes it feels really sad that what I do exists, because we should naturally be doing this, but we've engineered it out of our lives to such an extent that it's difficult to do the things that we really care about. So that's my vision, to make it accessible for more people to do this. Probably to the point where they don't need me anymore.
That's amazing. It's amazing how sort of like, the vision of sort of taking this out there as well, and there's a lot of great walks in Cheshire, that's for sure. And I think that even the sort of combination of like being in nature but also having like a lake nearby as well, and the water and like you said, the trees, the leaves and other stuff, really you just feel completely different by the end of it, really. And it's almost like the awe of nature that we kind of forget how important that is, really. And in terms of any events sort of coming up you'd like to share for our listeners, Ellie, anything sort of coming up? I know that your audience are based more northwest for the most part, but if anybody fancies a trip down to London, we do. Professor Jonathan Passmore and I, as I said, walking the length of the River Thames, and we're offering free coaching, and we do a walk every few weeks. It's usually about 8 to 10 miles where you get free coaching, you get to meet other people, and we're trying to focus on people who are looking at career transitions, maybe redundancy, are just looking for help with the next step, and they're really amazing days down at the River Thames. It does create an experience, and you can build really great connections with the people that come along. Or if people are close to Delamere Forest or Bickerton Hill, I run netwalks there every month. No, that's brilliant. And is there sort of, do you have like a website that if people want to sort of reach out to you too, Ellie, any sort of details you're happy to share that people can like find out more about your work or maybe get in touch?
I do, thank you, Jim. My website is elevatewithellie.co.uk, and I'm on socials. I'm mostly on LinkedIn, if people wanted to connect with me there.
No, that's brilliant, Ellie. It's been great speaking to you, and I'm sure that you'll sort of continue, going from strength to strength, that's for sure. It's an amazing concept to be fair, and I think that it's a great opportunity, like you said. It's a multi-outcome really to sort of clear our mind and obviously improve our fitness levels as well through going for a walk and getting our thoughts going. There's so many outcomes, positive outcomes involved in the experience. So it's a great concept you have there. So thanks again for joining us, Ellie. We wish you all the best.